Okay, well, thank you for the invite, actually, and this is, and I'll be speaking to you about the Accenture's Tech Vision 2019, and in general, Accenture generally releases the Tech Vision report, which covers trends, and in general, these trends cover everything from technology and digital as well, and as always, we also have security, which is part of the trends, and this time secure us to secure me, and this is I hope this will be a thought-provoking topic for you. And basically, this topic covers enterprises are not victims; they are vectors. This brings also to us to the topic that a company is an entity. It cannot function without connections to other people or other industry partners and suppliers. And basically, this is the point where we consider an ecosystem. So when we say an attack to a company, it's also involves an attack to the entire ecosystem. And this gives a short video about what key messages I'm trying to put forward.
Secure us to secure me. Enterprises are not victims, they're vectors. Companies are evolving to become more resilient against the new reality of cyber threats. Because the fact is, connected ecosystems increase companies' exposure to risks. Incidents that cripple one enterprise can grow rapidly and expand to threaten a company's ecosystem, industry, and beyond. While risk management activities are largely focused on a company's internal operations, attackers are looking at the whole house of cards. Enterprises must spread and share responsibility for security, starting in their own organization, and begin building security partnerships that reflect the ecosystems in which they participate. Security in an ecosystem-driven world is no longer about protecting the organization, it's about protecting everyone. It's time to present a united front and bring the ecosystem into the security fold. Are you ready to build a more resilient future? Is your business ready for what's next?
Yeah, so basically, as you got from the message was that security in an ecosystem-driven world is not about just protecting us. I mean, as you as an individual or an entity as a company, it's about protecting the entire ecosystem, your suppliers, your partners, and even your competitors. I will go through that in a second, where we give you an example. But in general, like one example, for example, Nike and Amazon have partnered, has involved Amazon as their digital partner, and with that, it involves a lot of connections between the two companies, and this also involves security and bringing that security bit into it, and ensuring that these connections that they have, digital connections, are secured. Basically, companies have already started collaborating again with each other to counter these threats that impact a particular ecosystem. For example, in 2018, JP Morgan Chase, MasterCard, Fidelity, these are not only, they only include their own partners, but they're also competitors. Basically, they are payment systems, payment card providers as well. But what happens is this is looking at as an attacker who is not going to attack just JP Morgan Chase. They are going to attack Citibank or Standard Chartered. So they are not just looking at just attacking one company. So what this exercise, which was done by these guys, was that they sat down and they did a red team, blue team exercise to identify what happens when a real threat takes place. And these are not just, as I said, they are also competitors. And what they identified was that they did not have a single policy as to how do they respond to threats, what do they consider as a threat, and as well as when do we contact law enforcement. And this was the best takeaway from this exercise that they conducted. I will, and also this gave them a good learning that they should have a playbook as to say when do you really contact or consider threats, and what do you consider as a threat. This is some also surprising kind of numbers here, but when in an Accenture survey, we identified basically 71% of IT business executives do not think cyber attacks are basically a black box, and they don't know what would affect, what would the attackers go for. Basically, what are the crown jewels of their company? So this is something which could help with doing a business impact assessment, and of course through basically understanding what are the threat vectors. 29 of the executives surveyed also noticed that the ecosystem partners are basically working diligently. The only 29% thought, and really by evidence, that they know that their partners are working diligently to fight cyber threats. As you can see in the numbers, there is 56% who trust, not by evidence, but trust. I'm not sure how that will work in real life, but trust is where they believe that their ecosystem partners are working towards or diligently working with fighting threats. And then there is a 14%, which is not so, I don't know if we can call it amusing, but they 14% hope that their partners or ecosystem partners are working towards fighting threats, and 1%, which is doubt that they are doing it. Today's connected and ecosystem world basically depends on, as we've seen also, that these threats that come about, they come and basically it takes only a matter of days. That, for example, WannaCry is a good example. We've heard a lot of talks on that about how it has impacted like 300,000 computers in a matter of days. The Mirai malware as well, affecting IoT devices. And also the spread of fake news, which we've seen as where the attackers kind of target information sources as the key to kind of spread fake news and propaganda. And it was researched that it basically, the fake news moves 6 times faster than real stories. Even the smallest disruptions in one service can cascade to massive business impact on other partners as well. And this is an example of the insider trading, which we have seen in the US, where the US stock exchange, basically the SECs have thought that this is one of the biggest threats or cybercrime in terms of for their industry. And what these attackers did is basically they attacked they decided not to attack just one of the companies. They decided to attack the entire publicly traded companies, basically in terms of, they thought which is the best approach, and they found that the newswire agencies were the best place to go to, because they have these unpublished press releases that they can attack and just get all the info. So they kind of partnered with this scrupulous or malicious traders, and basically got them to kind of work together to get the press releases early, and in exchange for 40% of the profits. So this is some bad news, but on the good side, I think companies are working to work together, and basically, and if it is said that if it's to be more resilient, we need to kind of not only best understand and prioritize or remediate the threats that face you, but the entire ecosystem. Because if you get attacked, you're basically it also impacts your partners, and vice versa as well. So basically, there comes the point of the third-party audits or the third-party risks that we speak about. One of the things are basically New York City Cyber Command worked with researchers from Wake University and University of Maryland to basically identify threat modeling procedures. And basically this strategy helped them to identify 500 unique intrusion attempts, and this helped them significantly. So basically this is the part where we're talking about threat modeling and the importance of it. Companies are also building resilience within. Basically, GE as a company has realized that they have several entities, and they need to ensure that security within each of these entities are secured, basically. So they have appointed CISOs in each of these entities to kind of counter threats in each of these entities because they are unique. Again, AT&T as well has set up a security advisory council to kind of counter threats, and basically, and these are basically from cross-functional business people who are also part of this council, which help them to identify even business threats. Addressing security early on in the development is as part of a critical aspect of which we have heard of DevSecOps. And maybe DevOps as well, and DevOpsSec. Basically, these kind of terms are used, but it's important to kind of include security in the development. And I just like to point that out here because it's one of the important aspects when we are delivering a software into production. It's also said that it's 30 times cheaper, basically, to fix these threats in the development stage. So the next is about the risks, which I spoke of, third-party risks, and basically ensuring that third parties are being reviewed and also being assessed based on not only their business performance. So as a company have to accept that your third parties or your partners are doing great in terms of managing the business, adding business value, but you should also show that what are they doing from security perspective. How are they performing in terms of managing your data, your information? So that's something which should also be shown and explained while you are having discussions with your vendors. Vendor Security Alliance has set up it's a non-profit organization, and this is an example of kind of the point which I was making about ecosystems, where Uber, Airbnb, and Square, and these large companies realize that they are using the same vendors. They're using the same vendors to provide their services. So they realize that it's best to have one audit done instead of each of these companies doing audits individually. It would be cheaper as well, and also cost effective, and as well as more obviously efficient in a sense. So they have set up this, and they do third-party audits, and they also release a free questionnaire. You can go and check it out. And they also cover GDPR-related controls and security controls as well. So this is the point of the kind of stepping back on the tech vision. Basically, this is what we should be expected to see going forward in the future, where companies work together and keep security as a not on a single purpose, on a single company, but it's a merge of or a shared responsibility. So governments also come in our case, governments, basically European Union has established a cyber rapid response force or team, which is led by Lithuania, but they counter attacks and threats, which is affecting both public and private entities as well. CERT.LV is doing this in Latvia, and I know that we have several conferences which is also covered in part of in this during this year as well, and they are doing a good job in also monitoring threats that affect Latvia. Some key decision points, basically to make it a little more thought-provoking. How basically, these are some questions, and we'll answer it as we go, but how has your company's exposure to risks changed in the light of the push towards ecosystem-driven business? Basically, as we know, businesses are kind of merging, and this kind of ecosystem is growing. But what we need to do is basically not only look at our infrastructure as a company, but also help identify where ecosystem connections expose you as a company, as well as how is your company exposing someone else's connections or data. So we need to basically develop a strategy to consistently and continuously assess and address vulnerabilities while ensuring that appropriate groups inside your organization are aware of those threats. Next is basically how do your business is reconsidering the relationship between DevOps and security. And if you're not already integrating your DevOps teams, basically it's time that we basically ensure that security controls, code reviews are done during those agile, as part of agile or however you are doing it. Basically ensuring that these controls are implemented early on in the life cycle. And then basically, how could your businesses participate in security alliances and other ecosystem ventures around security standards and governance models? Basically, seek your industry partners as well as competitors. Going back to the example of JP Morgan Chase, the attackers are not just looking at one company, they're looking at the entire industry. As well as the stock trading example I had given earlier, they're just basically looking at how do we get the whole pack of cards down. And that's exactly what we need to do, basically perform, if we can secure each other, it helps more basically from a cost-effective manner as well as from a perspective of efficiency as well. Perform basically security audits for your vendors and provide relevant findings to ecosystem partners who are using the same vendors. If applicable, open source your security tools so that if you've developed a solution, to protect yourself, you should also maybe also help others as well in your ecosystem. Netflix is an example of who has done this, and basically they open source their solutions and where they do tools which are running for DOS attacks and many others which are available freely on on the open source GitHub. And this is something which they are moving towards this trend which we have forecasted. So that's it from me for now. I mean, basically, if you have some questions, you can feel free to kind of go ahead.
Good one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions? Well, I do.
Okay.
Well, I do.
Sure.
The thing is that this goes together with one of the presentations we've seen before, and it was actually about research, about governmental institutions, public sector, and the private companies going public, actually, about incidents, etc. Yeah, and you mentioned exposure, and you mentioned exposure of such companies. And on one thing, you as a company and the company you work with the clients, and you have P2P relations, etc. But then there was this example where companies saw the ability to collaborate somehow and get the vendors independently. And so can you name, let's say, a motivators for the companies to have more exposure, to be more open with information about both the attacks, vulnerabilities, etc., sharing these experiences? Because I honestly don't see companies being very frank about security.
That's a good point. That's a very good point, actually, and that's the first question I had before presenting this, because this is as I said, is a thought-provoking aspect, and this is a trend which we are expecting to see in the future. Right now, we are still a closed environment here, and we do not see much examples as of now. That's the only one example which we had was about this JP Morgan Chase, and sitting down together. Even though they were competitors, they have different policies, and coming to kind of sitting together and just fixing their own policies, so they have one playbook, is something which is not something all companies are ready to do yet.
Yeah.
But in the future, it's to handle kind of these kind of threats that we are gonna see. It's gonna take an army, and basically what the prediction is more of that. If we share this responsibility, it's gonna help each other. Yeah, before it goes in. So basically, if there is a threat that is impacting your third party, you need to kind of bring it to their attention, as well as if there is a proper agreement in that ecosystem of that your competitor is also using that vendor, you are kind of working together to kind of stop a particular or basically ensuring that we monitor this vendor more closely. And the vendor, on the other hand, is not going to sit tight. He's going to obviously implement some controls or security controls that will help, both of them, because he doesn't want to lose business. But this is what we are we expect to see this more openness. And that's why I spoke about open source as well, about releasing tools that are open source that we can leverage in the future, and not just, licensing is one bit of it, but we'll have to see how that works. But that's something which we are expecting as
obviously,
growth.
because that as well, as the company secured their systems and eliminated some threats and made some preventional things that would prevent such attacks in the future. So it's actually a knowledge, it's a value. So there must be some motivation in order to not simply just inform the competitors that such fact exists, but sharing that knowledge or so. There was one another risk mentioned that some public institutions, they just chipped together so they could afford a security company that would actually handle some security issues for all of them together and simultaneously in a cohesive way.
Yep.
Yeah, but it turned out that when this security company had a breach or something like that, so the attackers could access all systems at once, simply because that was the vendor of many public companies. So there are risks involved in that sense anyway. So how far do companies need to be fair, and what is the minimum that still has to be left inside and not told?
So I guess it was covered in the video a bit, but it's a good question actually. And basically what this means is that we need to start from security as a company within, and ensure that what data we have, we do an assessment of what data we want to share, of course. And then as we move on, it's important to kind of this is the reference you're making for Vendor Security Alliance, which was this company which is basically, it's a non-for-profit organization which is set up by this Uber and basically the bigger companies which are working with them. And the idea of them is to kind of keep this stamp of the vendor, that if they have audited this vendor and they give the stamp out that, okay, this vendor is trustworthy, they do not need to do audits for each of the new companies that kind of use. This is like a certification kind of what we would say, like to kind of call it as of now, but it's like with this stamp you can trust this company basically, and that's the kind of what we're trying to kind of promote in this case. And it should, as a trend as well, we hope to see this growing more and more. And of course this is a recent it's recently set up. I would say their controls are quite decent. They have also included GDPR so it's not like they are outdated, but they're quite good in this sense, because they are always upgrading their controls, and they're keeping it free as well. You can download their questionnaire online as well.